The Seahawks have a new quarterback coming to town, Sam Howell, officially joining the team via trade. David Harrison of Locked On Commanders and I are going to be diving into this huge deal here early in free agency on a Crossover Thursday edition.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined for this impromptu crossover Thursday bonus episode. David Harrison of Locked On Commanders. And I just want to kick off the show. You were busy all day with press conferences. The Commanders have been very busy adding free agents. We're going to be talking about one of those particular players, Bobby Wagner, later in the show. But you were in the middle of interviewing one of these new players, and then the Seahawks and the Commanders agree to terms on a trade sending quarterback Sam Howell to Seattle to be the new backup for Geno Smith, maybe the future successor for Geno Smith. Take me through that process, because that had to be really interesting, trying to interview players, and then suddenly you've got this huge news with your quarterback being traded.
Yeah. So let's set the stage here, right? It's Zoom. Everybody knows Zoom, right? So we're on Zoom with Washington PR staff, and we've got Nick Allegretti, new Washington Commanders offensive lineman, Super Bowl winning guard from the Kansas City Chiefs, on the Zoom conference. And actually, I can tell you the reporter, Candy Waller of Bowie TV here in DC, is in the middle of asking him a question, Corbin. And all you see from the media panel, and granted, the YouTube audience and the live stream audience, they can't see the media members, so they didn't see this. But behind the scenes, all you see from all the media people, here's what you see, Corbin. All you see is in the middle of this question, we just all have our phones and heads go down. And Nick Allegretti is just sitting there probably wondering what all these clowns are doing in the middle of his answer. He's giving this very well thought out answer. I mean, the dude is passionate, the dude is driven, and we're all looking at our phones, and it's because we're trying to get confirmation from anybody, agents, owners, coaches, anybody that'll give us confirmation that Adam Schefter is correct, which he usually is, but you still want to confirm stuff, right? That Sam Howell is being traded to the Seattle Seahawks right in the middle of Nick Allegretti telling us why he's excited to be a Washington Commander. And oh, by the way, that was press conference like 3 out of 9 for the day. So the entire rest of the day, we're all trying to deal with Sam Howell being traded and talk to these players. Poor Dorrance Armstrong coming over from the Dallas Cowboys to play for his old coaches from the Dallas Cowboys, Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr. And he's got like 2-3 people in the Zoom with him, because we're all writing stories or planning. You know, I'm texting you, I'm texting other people to get reactions. You know what I mean? Like just part of the craziness, man. But you know what? Part of the reason that the NFL is king, because I don't know who called it the off season, but they need to, I don't know. They just need the postseason. There's no off season. It's just the postseason.
There's just constant news, and the NFL has mastered how to always be the front headline. And it's funny because our Locked On Seahawks listeners, they were listening to the Thursday show this morning, and I outlined a 4-step blueprint, what needs to happen next for the Seahawks in free agency. And one of the pointers I had was trade for Sam Howell or get a new quarterback. And I actually mentioned on X today that with Desmond Ridder getting traded, I thought, I want to see what the package is, because I knew from the combine 2 years ago, John Schneider, this is what one of the team sources told me, he was smitten over Sam Howell. He wanted him badly. So why didn't he draft him? They had Drew Lock, who was 25, coming over Russell Wilson. Basically, he was a pseudo draft pick to go with Geno Smith. And so they felt like they had so many other needs. They considered him from the 3rd round on, just decided not to make that selection. But now that Drew Lock might start in New York, or at least going to get a chance to compete for that, David, now they get the chance to bring him in. And you've had a chance. I've watched a lot of Sam Howell. I'm a big fan. I've loved him since UNC. But you've had a chance to watch him start for the Commanders. Everybody's going to look at the 21 interceptions. That's going to be the first thing that jumps out to him. But dive into what the Seahawks are bringing to town in this 23-year-old kid that has the physical tools. He clearly has the traits to play in this league.
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much hit the nail right on the head there. And I actually want to go back to 2022 with you, if we could go back to that NFL draft, because a lot of people thought the Sam Howell not going to be a first round guy, but potentially could be a second or a day 2 guy. And I got the opportunity to talk to Sam, later on during the season last year. And I actually asked him, I said, what was your draft advisory board, feedback? What were they telling you? And he said they were telling him, day 2 most likely, and a lot of teams were telling him day 2. And he said he didn't tell me which teams exactly, but he said there were a handful of teams that all told him, hey, bro, day 2. That's where we're looking at you. And they told him that during the Senior Bowl. So this is very early in the process. And he said that, like, no kidding, through the offseason, all 5 of those teams, you watch them and they all go get veteran quarterbacks, or they make moves that fill up their quarterback rooms. And when you look at what happened in the 2022 offseason, the Washington Commanders go get Carson Wentz. That's when Russell Wilson gets traded to the Denver Broncos. And like you mentioned, they got Geno Smith, but they also got Drew Lock in that trade. So they go fill up their quarterback room. And I just talked about this with Locked On Commanders listeners just earlier this week before the trade was going on. As far as if there is a trademark for Sam Howell, those are the teams you're going to look at. The teams that in 2022 had second or day 2 grades on him, but for whatever reason, whether it was they traded for a guy or they had too many quarterbacks already, could not pull the trigger on him. And the Seattle Seahawks were certainly one of those teams. So what I'm happy about is that Sam is going to a place that they want him. They want him now. They wanted him then. And I'm super happy about that. And also the Baltimore Ravens. I mean, look, you look at your new head coach out there. Remember, the Baltimore Ravens and the Washington Commanders had joint practices last year together for just a couple of days. But in those couple of days, I would say right now, Sam Howell did work against that Baltimore Ravens #1 defense. Now, the pass rushes aren't live. The hits aren't real. Get it. I got it. But still a very impressive week of practice for Sam Howell against the Baltimore Ravens. You had the stats up there, Corbin. And I think the one that I really want the Seahawks fans who are excited, you should be. This is a tough kid. He's a smart kid. He's got the arm. Like, when you see his arm in person, it is totally different than watching it on tape. Yeah. He has got a cannon for an arm, and he knows how to hit the ball where it needs to go. All he needs is protection. That's what he didn't get in Washington. That's what he needs in Seattle, is protection, not just from the offensive line, but also from the play caller. Don't make this dude throw the ball 50 times a game, some games. We have this conversation about Brock Purdy and Sam Howell, Brock Purdy and Kenny Pickett. I can't speak to you about Kenny Pickett, but what I can tell you is this: Brock Purdy's career high for pass attempts in a single game, Sam Howell has eclipsed that number in half of his starts. 9 times Sam Howell has eclipsed Brock Purdy's career high in attempts in a single game. That is amazing. Sam Howell, 612 pass attempts last year. Corbin, there are only 2 quarterbacks in the NFL history who have that many pass attempts and have a better interception percentage. So yes, 21 interceptions, but his interception percentage is 3.4%. That's not very bad. That's not a very bad percent. When you look at the NFL history of quarterbacks that have had that many pass attempts, only 2 guys had a better interception percentage than Sam Howell did. Warren Moon was one of those guys. I can't remember the other one, but Warren Moon was one of those guys. The other one, I think, was like Drew Brees. Those are really good established quarterbacks that you want to be compared to. So Sam Howell, the only first-year starter to have over 600 pass attempts in his career, except for Andrew Luck. So 5th round Sam Howell, first-year starter, is having as many pass attempts as Andrew Luck, the most polished quarterback prospect possibly ever to come out of the NFL. That is what the Washington Commanders did to Sam Howell in his first year as a starting quarterback, and they did it behind a suspect offensive line. You can blame it on defense and being scored on and all that stuff. You can blame it on whatever you want to, but at the end of the day, man, the Washington Commanders have just as much to own about Sam Howell and that team winning 4 games last year as Sam Howell does. But the good thing about Sam is his mentality never wavered. His focus never wavered, and that's what you're going to get in Seattle, is a dude who's got the arm, the skill, and the mentality to win in the league whenever the Seahawks need him to.
You're making this really easy for me. I mean, I am a big fan. I mentioned this earlier. I actually thought he might sneak into the first round. Like, I thought that he had all the physical tools, and he had a very low turnover rate in college, all 3 years at UNC. His last year, his numbers overall dropped, but he lost his top 3 receivers to the NFL.
Yep.
So you're talking about a guy that has had some, I don't want to say it was bad circumstances. North Carolina still had some talent, but it was not near the team his last year there. And he ran for over 800 yards to compensate. So going back to that offensive line, I'm glad he pointed out, because a lot of Seahawks fans have already seen this right now. They're looking at the interception numbers. They're looking at the fact that Sam Howell holds onto the football too long, or PFF has the Commanders as a top 15 offensive line. I don't know where that's coming from. Every game I watched Washington, they could not pass protect Sam Howell. But I want to get to the run game, and I think this is why Eric Bieniemy is now back in college. I think a lot of prospective employers looked at what happened in Washington and the fact that he at times just refused to get a running game going with Sam Howell. That was a detriment to him. And I don't think the Seahawks, knowing their history, I don't think the Seahawks are going to be following suit there. Even Ryan Grubb, who is coming from a pass-happy offense at Washington, they were still efficient running the football. I just don't see that being the same circumstance for him. What is the ceiling for this kid if they do give him a running game? Do you still see him as a long-term potential starter in this league?
I mean, look, I think you can get the job done with Sam Howell, right? I'm not going to sit here and tell you that he could be, the next Drew Brees or anything like that. But I think when you look at like career comparisons, I think you look at a guy like Baker Mayfield, and I know that Baker Mayfield also has some physical comparisons to Sam Howell or vice versa coming out in the NFL draft because they're a little bit stocky. They're both kind of short. They both kind of have that chip on their shoulder. But I think that's kind of realistic. If you look at what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers did in their 1 year with Baker Mayfield that ended up leading to this extension that they just signed him to, is they gave him, I think it was a top 12, top 15 at minimum scoring defense on the defensive side of things. They tried to give Baker Mayfield more of a running game than the Washington Commanders tried to give Sam Howell, but they had a little bit different of a running back situation. But they also gave him Mike Evans. They gave him Chris Godwin. They gave him a young tight end, Cade Otton, who's certainly serviceable, growing more into his role, right? But it wasn't just all on Baker. This wasn't a situation where, hey, Baker, you got to go make these things work. You look at the Washington Commanders, and not only are they having him throw the ball 612 times in a single season, which again, only first year starter to ever do that, Andrew Luck. Like that's it. Like Peyton Manning didn't do that. Tom Brady didn't do and granted, Tom Brady wasn't Tom Brady when he was his first year starting. Anyway, but look, balance is what you need, protection is what you need, and a defense is what you need. So, is he the guy that's going to rise all ships for you? No, he's not. But is he a guy that if you have the right weapons around him, you have the right system around him, can he thrive in it? Can he drive your car? Absolutely. Your car is just going to have some good tires on it. So I don't want to get too crazy and say that, he can be a franchise chasing guy by himself, but he's certainly a guy that if you put the pieces around him, he can drive you to the finish line and he can get you there. And I think you're right. Eric Bieniemy, look, I like Eric. I liked getting to know him for the year. I really like the dude, as man to man, but I think as an offensive coordinator, he did a lot of things wrong from his strategy, his consistency, and the way that he approached having the team that he had. The key thing to being a successful coach in the NFL, in my opinion, is knowing who you have, knowing what they're good at, and putting them in position to do that. And clearly, I think against the Chicago Bears, it was like 48 something straight passes that they ran against the Chicago Bears. It's ridiculous. Like I don't care what the lead is. I don't care what the score is. You can't make your quarterback throw 48 times in a single game. 4 times Sam Howell had a passer rating above 100. In each of those games, he had at least 2 touchdown passes, which you'd expect from a high passer rating, right? The last one, Corbin, Seattle Seahawks. Now, granted, the Commanders lost that game, right? But Sam Howell played very, very well. It was after that game that the wheels basically fell off. The New York Giants were the week after that. And that's basically when we saw Sam Howell hit a wall. And from that point on, it was just, all right, let's get this year over with without him getting seriously hurt, because this is just, you're not really gaining anything from that point forward. And then, of course, you see what's happened with the turnover in Washington, well-deserved. The last thing I'll say about Eric Bieniemy, man, is because again, I don't want to bash the man. I think he's a very good human being. I think he's a very smart football mind. I think he just got a little bit out of control. Terry McLaurin, man, ran more dig routes last year than he did his entire and any other season in his career. And this is a guy that's made his money off of running vertical routes, getting open on horizontal routes, and turning upfield. And you got this man running with his back, to the upfield side of the field. And you got a quarterback that, like a lot of young quarterbacks, is going to be late on some routes. Well, if you're late on a dig to your number one receiver, guess what's happened? You're getting about 4 or 5 yard gain, and you're not getting any yak. So again, when you talk about how do you protect Sam Howell, it's not just the offensive line, it's also the play calling. Don't have your number one receiver running dig routes with a quarterback that is late on dig routes. Like, at some point in your processing, you have to be able to say, that's not working. Let's have Terry do some other things. Maybe run some slants, right? Maybe run some double moves. Maybe run, some pick plays, rub plays. Do something other than
routes. Sam Howell's got a great deep ball. Howell's got a howitzer.
Yeah, use it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, it is what it is, man. But at the end of the day, I think that the coaching staff, just from what I do know of the Seahawks, which obviously isn't as much as you, but I think that it's going to be a better situation. And I've talked to some people who know Sam Howell very, very well, and they're very excited to see him going to Seattle. So I think that, there should be optimism. Again, not telling you to go get the bus ready, but there should at least be some optimism in the potential.
John Schneider has badly wanted a young quarterback that he can mold, and he has been lamenting this for years. They've drafted 2 quarterbacks in his 14 years of the helm, and now he's getting a guy that I think he really did want to draft a couple years ago. So as you said, the key is being wanted. And as you mentioned, the Seahawks game, I still think maybe the most impressive throw I saw all year was the touchdown that he threw to Gibson, where he didn't even follow through. It just flicked his wrist, and he's on the money with velocity. So you see the arm talent, you see the athleticism. He's got to cut down on some of the mistakes. But this is a trade that I think can certainly work for the Seahawks. And for Washington, you're getting a third-round pick now. You move up a few spots. You're going to move up some in the 5th round, giving up a 6th, just a pick swap, but you get earlier selections to go with what you expect is going to be your new quarterback that you pick in the 1st round. So this had a chance to potentially work out for both teams. When we come back on this bonus crossover, the Commanders and Seahawks, it isn't just, Dan Quinn now coaching in Washington. There's been a lot of parallels with these two teams in this offseason, and a legendary future Hall of Famer is now going to the Commanders. We're going to be diving into what that means for Washington's defense. That'll be coming up next year on this crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks and Locked On Commanders. This episode is brought your way by Game Time. You shouldn't have to worry or start ripping your hair out when you buy tickets to your next event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. If you want to see the 1st and 2nd round of the men's NCAA tournament coming up soon, thanks to Game Time's awesome flash deals feature and a detailed stadium map, you can get weekend passes for the NCAA tournament 1st and 2nd round for under $225, and it's super easy. Forget planning months in advance. Game Time has deals on the tickets right up to the day of the event, and with Game Time's guarantee, if you find tickets in the same section in a row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download a Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. We're having some technical issues with our commercial break things for some reason, but maybe that's the Sam Howell trade effect. I don't know. It's been kind of a crazy Thursday, but anyway, we are here on Locked On Crossover Thursday. We got Locked On Seahawks. I'm host Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined by David Harrison, host of Locked On Commanders, and we just spent an extensive amount of time looking at I guess in my case, it wasn't unexpected. For a lot of people, an unexpected trade, the Seahawks bringing in Sam Howell. This is not the only thing tying the Seahawks and Commanders together, though, here in this free agency period. An iconic linebacker, Bobby Wagner, maybe the best player in Seahawks franchise history. He is departing again, now reuniting with Dan Quinn and company in Washington, Ken Norton Jr. as well. And I can just sense this from seeing Commanders fans online, David. It seems like this might be the most excited the fan base has been in a long time. And I understand why. You're bringing in a player of Bobby Wagner's caliber who's still damn good.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think a lot of people wanted to see the Washington Commanders go after like a top shelf blue chip free agent when the open negotiating period started. Guys like Patrick Queen, the linebacker and the edge rusher, Neil Hunter, stuff like that. But at the end of the day, when you look at what the Washington Commanders are doing, I mean, I'm hyperbolizing here, but they signed like 30 people so far this offseason. But when you look at the cream of the crop, Bobby Wagner, one of the last ones that they're signing, but certainly one of the best ones, and it's incredibly exciting because something that I don't want to say complained about, Corbin, but something that we've talked about when we look at the Washington Commanders a lot is a lack of leadership, right? You got a lot of talented guys. Deron Payne is talented. John Allen is talented. Chase Young certainly had some potential. Montez Sweat was talented, but really there was no leader. There was no alpha, of the pack to kind of sit there and say, this is the direction we're going. Here's how we're going to get there. And here's why we're going to go there on the field. And we know, you talk to enough players that have played this game, coaching stops at the sideline. As soon as you cross that thick white border onto the playing field, the coaching stops. Now it's on the player to go out there and execute, do what they need to do, be in the right position, make the play that needs to be played at the time that needs to be made. And if you have nobody steering the ship on the field, the coach can only do so much from the sideline or the booth or wherever they are with their headset on. And now what we're expecting in Washington is Bobby Wagner is going to come in, and not only is going to bring some consistent play, not only is he going to bring that all-pro pedigree, but he's going to bring leadership. And I think, to me, that is the most important thing that the Washington Commanders defense needed under Dan Quinn. and Joe Witt Jr. and Ken Norton Jr. Those are the other position coaches. And that's what we're expecting. So Corbin, I mean, let me know, man, like where am I falling short? Where am I hitting the nail on the head of what we can expect from Bobby Wagner?
Bobby Wagner, and this is not a knock to some of the other amazing guys that I've gotten to cover in my 7 years as a beat reporter with the Seahawks, because there are a lot of really good dudes that I've had the privilege of being able to cover, but there is not a better man than Bobby Wagner. And we talk about the football skills. You mentioned the leadership aspect. Bobby Wagner, he is that alpha that when he steps in the locker room, he commands respect from everyone. It doesn't matter if you're offense, defense, primarily special teams, if you're a coach, an assistant coach, whoever you are. This is one of those rare guys that when he steps into a room, everybody focuses their eyes on him. And he's the one he's not necessarily the most vocal guy, but he can be when he needs to be. He leads by example. And I think that's going to maybe be the biggest thing here for the Seahawks. Like, you've got to make sure you're getting some leaders in the locker room, because they had some issues with that a few years ago when he played in LA for a season. They really struggled without his leadership. I think that is an incredible asset for him now. And then, of course, the things he does off the field as well. This guy could be nominated for Walter Payton Man of the Year every single year, because he is one of the best dudes in the NFL. The work that he does in the community back in his home state of California or up in Seattle, wherever he's at, the guy just makes a difference on and off the field. So as far as that leadership void, which has been a huge problem for the Commanders franchise for more than 2 decades, but you've got a new ownership group, you've got a new coaching staff. They're really trying to turn things around. Number 54 is the guy that can make that happen with just the spark that he provides. The one thing you do have to understand, if you're a rookie on the team, particularly rookie linebackers, just don't expect him to call you by name. He's not going to do that. Your name is going to be rookie until you earn the right for Bobby Wagner to call you by name. But that is part of his leadership. And I'll tell you, it's been effective with the young linebackers they've had that he's mentored over the years.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. And, we got to talk to 2 new Commanders linebackers on Thursday. Anthony Pittman coming over from the Detroit Lions. He's a young special teams guy looking to crack the defensive lineup. And then Frankie Louvu coming over from the Carolina Panthers. And both those guys, Frankie is expected to have a major role in this defense, play a lot of snaps, be an impact player on the defense. You can see the excitement in his face and his eyes, talking about getting to play next to Bobby Wagner and learn from him and work with him. And then Anthony Pittman too, just looking forward to kind of picking his brain and seeing what he can do. And for the Washington Commanders, man, I mean, Jamin Davis, first round draft pick, a few years ago, I expect that they're going to decline his 5th year option here this offseason. So he'll be going into his 4th year in a contract year. And I really do. I see the Washington Commanders bring some guys on the field, and Jamin, you're either going to lockstep in behind him and grow from it and become a better player from it and maybe earn another contract with this franchise that drafted you, or you're going to kind of show everybody who you are. And, people say it all the time, when people show you who they are, believe it. And if you can't get with Bobby Wagner's style of play on the field, then maybe, you're not long for that organization. The question that a lot of people have, Corbin, is with his age, with his run that he's had in the NFL, the leadership, the mentality. I don't think anybody's questioning that. They're wondering how much of a linebacker are they getting once the whistle blows.
Yeah, I think that this is kind of a twofold thing. And I know Bobby would disagree with my assessment on this, but I think, at 34, it's normal. You lose a step or two. He is not the athlete that he used to be, particularly in coverage. There are some limitations. Not that you can't have him as an every down linebacker. There's some people that disagree with me about this, that follow film for the Seahawks, don't agree with me on this. I still think he could be an every down linebacker. The issue is it does create some limitations for you schematically, because if you're asking him to cover a large area of grass or turf, or you're asking him to drop back 15 yards real quick and then try to cover receivers going across the middle or running backs. I mean, Antonio Gibson showed that last year in the game, Commanders versus Seahawks, when he got isolated. Now, that's a phenomenal athlete, but still, in Bobby Wagner's prime, he could take those kind of assignments. He can cover guys like that. You can't ask him to do that now. There are limitations in coverage, but as a run defender, he had 183 tackles last year. A lot of Seahawk fans point to that number and say, well, it was just because we were on the field a lot. That certainly contributed, but he was in the top 10 linebackers in the NFL in average depth of tackle, which is remarkable when you make that many stops. He had 11 tackles for loss. He was playing behind a D-line that at times got dominated, and gap integrity was an issue, and he still put up the numbers they did. I felt bad for him late in the season because it felt like at times he was one of the few guys up front that was truly given 100%, particularly in their loss to the Steelers, where he was trying to bring down Najee Harris with 6 guys pushing behind, and it didn't seem like any of his teammates were willing to throw their helmets in the fray, and he almost got him down anyway. So as a run defender, a pass rusher, he is an efficient blitzer. He has been for a long time, but now that is really a big part of his game. So I look for Dan Quinn to find more ways to do that on defense where they can maximize the strengths of Bobby Wagner. You just have to understand that this is not a 28-year-old Bobby Wagner in coverage and some of the things you're asking him to do.
It's going to be interesting because, when we talked to Dan Quinn when he first got hired, I asked him specifically about the differences in his defenses from his Seattle days, going to his Atlanta days, and then his Dallas days, because there's a dramatic and noticeable shift from even fronts and to odd fronts. And I asked him about that, and he said, he's learned some things, and he kind of understood that you can't, the Legion of Boom, that method of defense used to be, the bee's knees and the way that you could stop any offense. And nowadays you got to be able to shift and go around. So it's interesting. I'm very interested to see how, Coach Quinn and Coach Witt Jr. specifically go about designing up a scheme that's going to accentuate Bobby Wagner, because we do expect him to be a big part of the organization, not just from a locker room leader standpoint, but also on the field. Even if it isn't every single down, certainly probably most of the downs, at least for a year. So looking forward to it. The deal isn't officially done yet, but as soon as it is, we'll get to talk to him. And I'll tell you, Corbin, how this is, man. You talk to a lot of these players, and I don't want to say you don't get excited to speak to football players anymore and NFL guys, but there are just others that take that excitement to another level. And Bobby is certainly one of those guys that's going to take my excitement to do my job that day a little bit higher.
Yeah, and I would tell you this, some advice with Bobby Wagner: make sure that you talk about books. The guy is a bookworm. He loves to learn things. Nice. And second, he is a huge Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle fan. So if you say Cowabunga dude to him, you're going to be a favorite in the media. He loves that kind of stuff.
Bro,
so we've got an experience working with Bobby, and he is the best human being that I've had an opportunity to work with. Yeah. So the leadership he brings off the field is just as great as on the field, and just the effort that he puts into trying to help people with his platform. He's a phenomenal human being. And so I'm sure that the Commanders, the excitement goes beyond the fact that this guy is a future Hall of Famer, a first ballot Hall of Famer, maybe the best linebacker of his generation. I think he's still got a few good years, 2 or 3 good years left in him if he wants to play. He could be a London Fletcher type that plays into his late 30s and still can play at a high level and can play a bunch of snaps for you. So that has to be exciting for the Commanders.
Yeah, man. I'll say 2 more things before we wrap this thing up for us. First thing about the Ninja Turtles thing, I'm a big Ninja Turtles fan. In fact, Adidas has actually got a pair of Ninja Turtle shoes coming out pretty soon, and I've got an alert set on my phone so I can try to get those things when they drop. So he and I are going to get along on that front. And then the other thing is, Seahawks fans, look, if you ever come checking at Locked On Commanders to check in on your boy Bobby, please do. You're more than welcome. But I'm just going to let you understand, I did this because I used to cover the Buccaneers for this great network as well. And when Tom Brady signed with Tampa, I immediately, Corbin, started saying, Tampa Bay Buccaneers legend, Tom Brady. So be prepared. You are going to hear Washington Commanders legend, Bobby Wagner, if you come over to Locked On Commanders. It's not disrespectful to the 12s. It's not disrespectful to Seahawks. Trust me, that there is no disrespect there. But it's just how excited I am personally to see this organization get a linebacker of that caliber.
And listen, Seahawk fans, this is one of the crazier careers that we've seen for a player, because Bobby Wagner is still playing at a high level, yet this is the second time in a 3-year period the Seahawks have said goodbye. So Seahawk fans, they're familiar with this. And I think that they'll be more tolerant of Washington Commanders legend Bobby Wagner than they were with Los Angeles Rams legend Bobby Wagner. That certainly rubbed a lot of 12s the wrong way. But either way, an exciting couple days here for both these teams. The Seahawks bringing in Sam Howell, the Commanders getting that leader for their defense, and Bobby Wagner reuniting with Dan Quinn, Ken Norton Jr. and company. It's an exciting time for both fan bases, and everybody's optimistic this time of year in free agency as well. But these are certainly big moves for both teams. As always, I'm Corbin Smith of Locked On Seahawks. You can follow me on X at Corbin Smith NFL. He's David Harrison of Locked On Commanders. You can follow him at DHarrison82. Seahawks fans, you want updates on Bobby Wagner, he'll provide them. But as he said, just make sure to be expecting Washington Commanders legend Bobby Wagner. He'll be covering all that as Wags gets used to his new surroundings in DC. Thanks for listening. Make sure you subscribe for free on whatever podcast platform you listen to. Locked On Seahawks, Locked On Commanders. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday.